Good evening. My name is Matthew, and today I'm going to explain how to algebraically find the circumcenter of any triangle. So let's begin by first understanding what a circumcenter is. Essentially, the circumcenter is the intersection of the perpendicular bisectors on each side of a triangle. A perpendicular bisector is the perpendicular line of a side of a triangle based on the position of the midpoint on that same line. It might sound a bit confusing, but it'll make more sense as we go along. To algebraically find the circumcenter, we need to divide it into 4 steps. First, we will need to choose 2 sides on our triangle and find the midpoints of both of them. Secondly, we need to find the perpendicular slope for each side. Then, we need to plug both slopes and the respective points into point-slope form and come up with 2 equations in slope-intercept form. We finally need to find the x and y values of the circumcenter by setting both equations equal to each other, solving for x, and then plugging the x value into one of the equations to find the y value. Before we start our problem, it is important to understand that this process requires a lot of algebra and arithmetic. So throughout this video, and any future problems you may encounter, make sure to triple check your calculations, as doing something as simple as forgetting a negative sign can cause your final product to be incorrect. Alright, so our problem tells us that we need to find the circumcenter of a triangle composed of 3 points, A, B, and C. Let's begin with our first step, which is to find the midpoints of 2 sides on the triangle. These midpoints will be important later for when we plug them into point-slope form. Alright, so to find the midpoint, we actually need to use something called the midpoint formula, and it's right here. So this is the midpoint formula. And basically what it tells us is that we need to add our x values, divided by 2, and that's the x coordinate of our midpoint, and then add the y values, and then divide it by 2, and that's our y coordinate of the midpoint. So we're first going to start with side AB of our triangle, and we know that our first x value is going to be 4, so 4. Our second one is 8, so 4 plus 8 over 2. So those are 2 x values divided by 2, comma, and then our y values. So our first y value is 6. Our second one is 2, so 6 plus 2 over 2. So now all we need to do is simplify this, and I think you all know how to do this. So 4 plus 8 is 12, and then 12 divided by 2 is what? It'd be 6. So 6 is our x coordinate in the midpoint of side AB, and then for the y coordinate, once again, just simplify. So 6 plus 2 is what? It's 8, and then 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 6 comma 4 is the midpoint of side AB. So let me write that down. So AB, midpoint, this is the midpoint of side AB. Alright, we literally need to do the exact same thing except for side BC. So all we get is plug in our values and then add them and then divide it by 2, and then we'll get our x and y coordinates. So let's grab our first x value of BC, which is 8. Our second x value is also 8, divided by 2. And then let's get our y values. So our first one is 2, second one is 8, divide that by 2 as well. And simplify that down, so that is equal to, well, 8 plus 8 is 16. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this is our second midpoint, which is the midpoint of side BC. So we have our 2 midpoints now. Remember this, and I'm going to move on to the next step. Alright, so now we need to find the perpendicular slopes of both of our sides. So let's start with side AB, and we're going to use this formula right here, which allows us to find the slope of our side using the 2 points. So y2 is 2, y1 is 6, so 2 minus 6 over our x values, which x2 is 8, and x1 is 4. Do the simple math here, and 2 minus 6 is negative 4. 8 minus 4 is 4. Some of you may know that this is equal to negative 1 right here. And now we need to find the perpendicular slope of it. So it's very simple. Basically, we need to find the negative reciprocal of this number. So we consider this as a fraction, swap the numerator and denominator, and then multiply the numerator by negative 1. So I'll say that again, swap the numerator and denominator, and then multiply the numerator by negative 1. So let's go and do that with this one. So if we swap them, it'd be 1 over negative 1. And then if we multiply the top, it'd be negative 1 over negative 1, which is just a 1. So our perpendicular slope for this line is 1. And that's going to be really easy to work with in our later algebra that we're doing. So we know that the perpendicular slope of line AB is 1. So let's go to our next one, which is line BC. So y2 is 8, y1 is 2, so 8 minus 2 over our x values, which is 8 minus 8. just like that. We just do the simple math. 8 minus 2 is 6 over 0. And since our denominator is 0, we know this should be equal to 0. And the perpendicular slope would also be 0. Like if we did negative reciprocal on this, it would just be 0. 0 cannot change, it's just 0. So our perpendicular slope for this one is 0. And some of you may know that that is actually a horizontal line, which is pretty cool. Alright, so for this next step, we're going to be plugging the values of our midpoint coordinates and the slope for each of our sides that we've done so far into point slope form right here. And in case you don't know, this will convert into a slope intercept form, which will give us an equation to work with. So let's go ahead and plug in our values here. So the the y value of our first midpoint for side AB is 4. So we have y minus 4. And then equals our slope. So our slope for side AB, remember, was 1. And then x minus, and then our x value for the midpoint, in case you forgot, was 6. So x minus 6, just like that. And now all we got to do is solve for y. So y minus 4 equals, and we just got to distribute here. So it's literally just the same thing because it's 1, so it's x minus 6. And then we'll just move 4 over, so literally just subtract it on both sides, or sorry, add it on both sides, and we will have our answer. So y equals, and then we added 4 on both sides, so x, and negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. So y equals x minus 2. And right there is our first equation. I cannot circle it, but whatever, that works. And we just do the same thing with our second side. So our second side is side BC. So let's just go ahead and plug in our midpoints, coordinates, and our slopes. So y minus 5 is the y coordinate of our midpoint, equals then our slope. So our slope is 0, and then x minus 8. Because 8 is the x value of our midpoint for this side. And once again, we just go through all the steps. So y minus 5, and since it's 0, everything that is distributing to will just be 0. So it'll just be big whole 0. So let's put 0 here, and now we'll just move 5 to the other side. So y is equal to 5. Now, this is huge. So what we've essentially just done is figured out the y value of our circumcenter. And let me explain. Well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It literally says y equals 5. This is the y value of our circumcenter. So we basically kind of took a shortcut there. Because the slope was 0 for this equation, all we had to do was solve for y, and we got 5. Because the x cancel out because it's 0. So literally, the y value of our circumcenter is 5. And now we have our two equations here. Y is equal to 5, and y is equal to x minus 2. So let's move on to our final step. Alright, so for our final step here, all we have to do is set the equations equal to each other, and then solve for x, and that's it. We'll have our x value. Now, as I said, we kind of took a shortcut here, and we got lucky when we got the y is equal to 5. But normally, what you'd have to do is set them equal to each other, solve for x, and then plug that x value into one of the equations to find a y value as well. So we got lucky here, but keep in mind that's not always going to be the case. So let's just go and get started. So these two equations, just set them equal to each other. So x minus 2. And then y equals 5, so just 5. So x minus 2 is equal to 5. And this is the easiest linear problem ever. Literally just add 2 to the other side, and x is equal to 7. And there it is. Our circumcenter x value is 7. In fact, hold on. Let me color code this. It might help a little bit. So this, our x value is 7, and our y value up here is 5. And there we go. That is the circumcenter for our triangle. So as a recap, we found the midpoints of two sides in our triangle, found the perpendicular slopes that went through those points, plugged everything into point slope form to create two slope intercept form equations, and set both equations equal to each other to find the x value. Thanks for watching, and remember, geometry keeps you in shape.